This is part 2 of lesson 3 of the Tool2Type workshop. Let me give you a quick demonstration as to how I would make the other punctuation I asked you to create. First, instead of using the Categories panel, I'll generate the new glyphs from the Glyphs menu. Or I can select Command-Shift-G, and I'll type their names into this pop-up. I'll make sure I get the spellings correct, and I'll begin working on the forms. The colon and semicolon seem pretty straightforward. Since they're derivatives of the period and comma, I'll use their components to create them. You may even have thought of this on your own, but you may not have thought to use the lowercase s to create the question mark. Of course, there's quite a bit of editing I need to do to this form to make it really look like a question mark, but it is much easier than drawing the form from scratch. As I refine this, I also want to make sure it has the same slant as this exclamation. And now that I think of it, I see I need to give that slant to the colon and semicolon. For those who are non-English speaking Europeans, diacritics are nothing new, but they can be a little bewildering to the rest of us. Like the punctuation, it's important they are consistent with the font design. A few look rather unusual, and frankly, they can be elusive in their form. If you're unsure what the Sedia, for example, should look like, do some research by studying established fonts to see how they were executed. But be careful. Many designers, especially English speakers, are not always well versed in the nuances of the forms. You'll quickly get a feel for those who know what they're doing and those who don't. Rather than boring you with creating the diacritics, I'm going to steal them from good old Shalimar. You'll want to give the metric side bearings a value of 0. Now that these have been created, I can then begin adding those foreign characters. I'm only going to select a few for now. Okay, I think that's probably enough. I'll go ahead and open these. Notice that these characters are using components to create the glyphs. This is a huge time saver. I'm going to delete these because there's a couple of things I forgot to do. If you recall, I needed to increase the size of the glyphs that I transferred over from Shalimar. I need to do the same to the diacritics, so I'll do that now. Okay, there's more to learn regarding diacritics, which we'll return to. Right now, I want to spend the rest of our time in this video discussing spacing and kerning. I'm going to go ahead and delete this character, and when we come back to the diacritics, I'll add it back in. Let's talk about spacing and kerning before we do that. These are the forms that I've heavied up in this font. I'm going to open them up, and you can see that there's a little bit of issues with some of the spacing. For example, this HOT combination has a few issues. Too much space between the T and the O, and not enough between the H and the O. By the way, I changed this O by using the C as a template to get the weights right. The closer in shape they are, the easier spacing and kerning will be. More on that in a bit. Since the H and the O caps have shapes that are common throughout a font, type designers often use them as reference to adjust spacing for the entire design. You can see here how tight the O is to the H on the left and how open it is on the right. The question is it an issue with the O or the H? Since I have the side bearings of the O even on both sides, it's definitely the H that's the problem. What I'll need to do is give the H a little more space on the right. Since the cross stroke on the left is sticking out a bit, I need to take that into consideration when I adjust the side bearings. I'll give the left side 0 and the right 50. Now the spacing is much more even, and it's just a matter of adjusting each of the other capitals to ensure consistency. While I'm on the subject, it's a good rule of thumb to give lighter weight fonts more space between forms and heavy weights a much tighter set. Okay, I had to change the O to make it look more calligraphic. I just couldn't take it anymore. Anyway, let's move on. Several letters in a font cause problems with regard to spacing. The T is one of them. Notice that if I have the stem in the very center of the metrics, It requires a negative parameter on the right side bearing. I could go even further than a -75, but I think I'll add a little more space to the left. I'll give it another 20 units. Now you can see that the O has way too much space between the T's, especially compared to the H's, and that brings us to kerning pairs. Word of warning, kerning is one of the last things you do in a font. Get all of the spacing of each glyph done first before you move on to kerning the font. Slanted characters like the A, V, W, etc. come with their own unique issues. They'll all require attention during the kerning process. Again, just make sure each letter form is fitting properly and in the center of its bounding box. For those who may be asking, what is kerning? In essence, it is programming that tells the font to adjust the spacing when two characters are typed in sequence. These are called kerning pairs. In the info panel, you have kerning parameters you can set for each pair. I can kern this letter A to the T and the O to the T on both sides. Now, whenever these kerning pairs are together, the spacing will be adjusted accordingly. It looks like I've just about run out of time. There's still more to cover with spacing, kerning, and diacritics, but it'll have to wait until lesson 4. That's it for now. Hope to see you again soon.